So no shit, there I was, 19 years old. I was a kid. I had just been in high school like 30 seconds ago. And I was a month maybe into basic training. And this drill sergeant was asking me if I wanted to go become a Green Beret, or at least try to go become a Green Beret. I mean, I had barely graduated high school, and yet I was given this opportunity. And I was so amped, but also I was freaking out. Hey guys, this is the Dead Warrior Society. I'm your host, Zach Masick. Welcome to the channel. I thought I would do like a little bit of an introduction, just sort of explain what it is I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and I guess some background and context of who I am and why you should or probably shouldn't be listening to what I have to say. So my entire life, I've had this weird obsession with warfare. And I apologize if that sounds creepy. I don't know why. Can't explain it. I don't know. But literally there are photographs of me when I was a kid carrying around plastic swords. And I hear stories from my relatives and my aunt and uncle that I used to go around and I would carry this sword in the back of my shirt. And I would literally at like dinner parties whack people in the ankles and then giggle. Not that I was some sort of asshole kid. I was a toddler, whatever. Anyways, that's all I knew. And I was a terrible student. I barely graduated high school. I mean, I graduated with a 2.7 GPA. The first time I took the ACT, I got a 19. I mean, other than showing up to class, I didn't read. I didn't do my homework. I didn't study for tests. Like, I was the worst student. And on top of that, I wasn't very athletic. By the time I got to high school, I had quit all the sports that I was halfway decent at. And I was more focused on Spider-Man comic books, girls, and having fun with my friends and playing video games, quite honestly. Being in school, the only time I would pay attention to anything is if we were talking about war. And it didn't matter what war. It could be ancient Greek warfare, it could be World War II, it could be the Civil War. Like, I would be sleeping in the back of class and we'd be in history class. And all of a sudden the teacher would say, "Hey, today we're going to talk about Gettysburg." And immediately my ears perked up. And again, I'm hardwired this way. I don't know why or how or what the influence was. I got to high school, watched Band of Brothers like a million times. And I just knew I wanted to be in the Army. And you have to remember, this was back in like early 2000s. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan had kicked off. I was living in Connecticut at the time, so we were really close to the events of 9/11. We had friends whose parents unfortunately passed in that terrorist attack. And so it sort of hit close to home, and nobody in my high school ever joined the military. There were like one or two guys, maybe. And I sort of felt this weird duty or obligation. I don't know. So my parents begged me not to go. I was insistent. And then finally they persuaded me to go try college. I somehow got into the University of Montana. I think I was there for all of a week. And I went to the recruiting station. And at first, like everybody, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. But then for a bunch of reasons, I decided to go to the Army. And they offered me a airborne ranger contract right out of the gate, which just guaranteed that after basic training in airborne school, I could go to RASP. Today they call it RASP. It was like ranger tryout, so to speak. So I go to basic training. I'm there. And again, miraculously, I had somehow done well on the written test, the ASVAB, to get into the Army. And I don't know how, because like I said earlier, I'm not an athletic person at the time. I excelled at the PT test. And so one day, a drill sergeant from 4th Platoon was a SF qualified guy, hit his long tab, and he pulled me and coincidentally my best friend at the time out of formation and said, "Hey, do you guys want to go try for Special Forces?" And we sort of hemmed and hawed, and I was nervous because I thought you had to be in the Army forever to go, and you had to be like the best of the best of the best to go join SF. And he had said, "Would you rather be in high school or would you rather go to college?" And obviously rather go to college. So he said yes. I had to get a waiver because I think at the time you had to be 20 years old to get an 18 X-ray contract. So I got that. Fast forward, go to airborne school, go to selection. And I mean, I'm excited, but I'm terrified. I am surrounded by guys who are wildly more qualified to be there than I was. I mean, I think it was like 170 pounds soaking wet. I'd been in the Army for 20 seconds. I barely knew how to be a soldier, let alone go become a Green Beret. And somehow I slipped through the cracks and I got selected. And then I volunteered to be a Special Forces medic. Part of the reason I did that was because a long time ago, my dad had told me, if you want to be an asset to any organization, you should gather or gain skills that others or very few people around you have. And because the medic course is so long and so difficult and academically rigorous, very few people actually go and volunteered to go become a medic. So I did that. Again, I think the Q course was like two plus years. At every moment, I did not think I was going to get through. Like, I was expecting someone to say, hey, this is a huge joke, you're not supposed to be here, and pull me out. It didn't happen. I graduated in November of 2010. Went to my unit. I was 23 at the time. I literally showed up to my company and they said, hey, every team basically needs a medic. What team do you want to be on? As a medic, there are so few, specifically compared to like the other jobs on an ODA, that you kind of get your pick of the litter. Do you want to go to the Halo team? Do you want to go to the Mountain team? Like, what do you want to do? And I wanted to go to the dive team because I had heard that dive teams in SF were the best in shape. They were the most aggressive. They got the best missions overseas. It was the most difficult team to be on. The expectations were super high. And I always wanted to just be the best at that point in my life. And the dive team, because they got the most difficult missions, they had the most senior guys, most qualified guys, the guys who were just like off the charts most of the time, generally speaking. So I told them I want to go to dive school. They said, fuck you. Absolutely not. You're way too green. You're an 18 X-ray. No way in hell. And I persisted. And because they desperately need medics and dive qualified medics, they kind of, I wouldn't say they didn't have a choice, but they were like, fuck it. Like, you're going to go and fail like everybody else. And you'll just go to whatever other team needs you. And, that'll be that. Little did they know, I actually swam my whole life. Mostly as a kid, I was on swim team. And then in high school, I dabbled in some stuff on the swim team. So I was very comfortable in the water. So I got dive qualified down in Key West. And then pretty much from there on, we sort of started to slowly prepare. And then we prepared for Afghanistan, went to Afghanistan, did a 7-month deployment. I could talk a lot about that. Super interesting. We're in Kandahar and got done with that deployment. And at the time, so right around then, I was 24. And looking back now, I realized I was super burnt out. I mean, I had joined the Army and just fast tracked through schools, never took a break, went straight to my team, more schools, and then straight into pre-deployment training and then deployment. Also, there were some personality conflicts that was difficult to sort of navigate, especially as such a junior guy on such a senior team. And so unfortunately, I decided to get out. I had only been in the Army for almost 6 years. So just shy of 6 years. And so I decided I was going to go to college. I couldn't get into college. They didn't give a shit about what I did in the military. They just cared about how I did in high school and on my ACT scores. So I had to eat crow. I applied to like 6 schools and they weren't like great schools either. I went to Austin Community College. Eventually, again, somehow by the grace of God, I got into Columbia University. And I thought at the time, I had learned that if I just work my ass off and I push myself to the absolute limit, yeah, I might have to work twice as hard as everybody else, but I'll get what I want. So I'd go to Columbia, I'd get straight A's. And that was that was not the case. I worked my ass off. I literally was sleeping in the library a lot of times just to prepare for tests and write papers. But it was a huge blow to my ego. I ended up doing well. I graduated with good grades, but Columbia taught me how to understand history, how to analyze history, where to start, where to find the answers. And it was, although I disagreed with so many things that they were teaching, it was a great foundation for the rest of my life. And it gave me tools to help me do all kinds of things. But my obsession with history just continued. And basically from the time I graduated to yesterday or this morning, I just wake up and I read. I don't read fiction. I fucking hate fiction other than Lord of the Rings and a few other things. But I just read. I read for at least 1 to 2 hours every morning before I do anything else. And typically it's very heavy, dense books about history. And recently, or I would say about a year ago, I was investigating the French and Indian Wars, and there were certain arguments that just drove me absolutely crazy. And I knew that the historians were wrong, and so I wanted to prove to myself and to them that they were indeed wrong. And so I went into just an absolute insane state of mind, and I just obsessively read about this one particular war and event that took place, and I spent 3 months doing that. And what I found at the end of it was I wanted to talk to somebody about it. And I had no one to talk to. My poor wife I was trying to tell her about this stuff, and she's like, I don't fucking care. and so I needed an outlet, but I didn't know what to do. So I wrote like 60 pages thinking I'd write a book. I'm a terrible writer, so that just didn't go anywhere. But it was fun. It was a fun, cathartic exercise for me to get my thoughts out. I remember I'd reached out to a handful of professors. One professor at West Point actually got back to me. And unfortunately for me, despite the fact that he was an American historian with like a PhD, I was asking a specific question about a raid that took place in what is now Canada during the French and Indian Wars by the Rangers, Robert Rogers and his Rangers. And he had no idea what I was talking about, which I could not believe. And so then fast forward again, one of the things I like to do, I really like to cook at night. It's therapeutic, whatever. It's weird. But what I do is I listen to lectures on YouTube from universities. I mean, get on YouTube and go look. You can find all kinds of wonderful lectures from Ivy League schools to state schools. And so after years of doing this, I started to run out of material and I was bored. And also the material that was there was not discussing, it didn't talk about the things that I wanted to hear about. And it was really frustrating. And of course I did hardcore history with Dan Carlin. I think it's Dan Carlin. I love his stuff. But unfortunately, Dan doesn't put out many episodes very often. So I didn't know what to do. So it just dawned on me one day as I was watching one of these stupid videos that I think GQ puts them out. I can't remember. Men's Gentleman's Magazine puts out these videos from like these fucking historians, and they break down scenes from films and tell you if they're realistic or not. I don't give a shit. I think all that stuff is just Hollywood clickbait. I just drivel. I don't care. It's meaninless to me. I find it to be so stupid. It's Hollywood. They're telling a story. It's entertainment. It's not meant to be historically accurate. I just don't care. Anyways, so what do I do? So there was one video I watched in particular, and this guy was breaking down a scene from 300 and describing to the audience why it was not accurate, historically accurate. And I was just so annoyed. And he said something that I knew was so grossly false that my hair, I think, literally just combusted into flames. And I didn't know what to do. So I did what I had done with the French and Indian Wars, and I just started doing research. That somehow snowballed into 6 months of rereading all the primary sources: Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, Plutarch, Paul Saint, like you name it, I read it as much as I could, and then everything else in between. I was reading Victor Davis Hansen, Han von Weiss, Paul Ray, Paul Cartledge. Like I was in the weeds, and again, I needed to talk about it. I needed to like get it out. It was almost this urge that I couldn't control. And so it dawned on me, like, why not start a show? And so here we are. This is what I'm doing. I want to say it's for you guys, which I guess, of course it is, or else I just wouldn't put this out there. But quite honestly, this is for me. I need to get this shit out of my system. I don't know any other way to describe it. I'm obsessed with this stuff. I find it fascinating. It's like an itch I can't scratch. It's like an itch that just won't go away. So what is this show? So what we're going to do is we're going to go through various historical events, wars, obviously campaigns, individuals. Sometimes we'll focus on broad events. Sometimes I'm going to focus on institutions. If you watched some of my previous episodes, I talk a lot about Spartan institutions like the education system and the government. I'm not just fascinated with, George Washington crossed the Delaware at Christmas. I want to know how religion is tied into warfare in the ancient world. I want to know how the politics got involved with warfare, or the cultural, socioeconomic stuff that is ingrained and has a huge impact on warfare. Sometimes I'll kind of move back and forth between maybe describing some of the economic things that are happening in a certain time and place and how that is affecting the military. But my goal is to basically cover a subject matter until I get absolutely sick of it and then move on to the next one. I started with Sparta. It seemed like it made the most sense given how much of an impact ancient Greece and Sparta has had on our modern culture and how much fascination there is with all of that whole realm. But next I'm pivoting and I'm going to a completely different place at a completely different time. And the warfare looked radically different. The other thing I want to mention too is I am going to do a focus on asymmetrical warfare. Sometimes it's called unconventional warfare. Sometimes it's called guerrilla warfare or irregular warfare. Because of my background in special operations, it's something I'm keenly obsessed with as well. So, you'll sort of find that there is this through line with every subject or every sort of idea that I cover, that I'm always searching for the potential of an insurgency or, and a good example of asymmetrical warfare and what that looks like and the commonalities between that. Like, what does the invasion of Mexico and the war with the Aztec by Cortez have to do with the way in which we conduct irregular warfare today? So anyways, that's the channel. I hope you guys join me. I love doing this stuff. I did not think in a million years I would ever do a YouTube channel or a podcast, but unfortunately there's not really a history podcast that's accessible. It's not granular. I'm not a historian. I don't know big words. I'm going to probably not use big words. I'm going to talk to you like a normal fucking human being. Like we're boys and we're hanging out, having a drink, and we're going to go, talk about the irregulars, partisan warriors, soldiers in the Revolutionary War. So we'll see you out there. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you have any things you would like me to cover or talk about or do research on and then report back, by all means, hit me up. I'm wide open to ideas. So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoy the show.